find the best scoring opening with a style which doesn't fit you, and you will lose time after time. Play a disputable opening which fits your style, and you'll do much better. The fact that people don't want to play gambits because they are unsound, I can understand if it has to do with title players. Even then, it's debatable. But below 2000, there are almost no unsound opening. And just because of that, I believe that the following opening, according to all the top engines nowadays, can be assessed as a very suspicious, even bad one. From another point of view, playing against humans, humans who don't know theory, who don't use engines, against club players who simply don't defend well, those positional guys who just hate to play tactics, I believe you're about to make your right choice. So, in today's lecture, I'm going to talk about Ryder Gambit. It's part of the Black Demer Gambit, and it begins after d4. So even if they play d5, you can play it after knight c3, knight f6, and e4. And if they, and by the way, when you play knight c3, you do want to play e4. So all players are just going to answer this with a knight f6. On the other hand, after knight f6, knight c3, you once again want to go for e4, and all the positional guys and Indian players who were just willing to avoid this e4, they're about to play d5 here. And then you just go e4. In these positions, white intends to follow up with f3, usually on the next move. White obtains a tempo and half-open file in return for a pawn. In the Ryder's Gambit that I'm about to show you, in return for 2 pawns, white aims to achieve rapid development and active passing of his pieces in order to rapidly build up an attack at the cost of the gambiting the pawns, and I'm talking about 2 pawns. And it's one of just few gambits available for white on the first move d4. So let's go. When they take on e4, you just play f3. And when they take, I decided in this lecture to show you Demer Gambit. Many of the guys online know this gambit as Black Demer Gambit. But to be honest, Emil Demer himself referred to Queen f3 as the classical double pawn sacrifice. But on the other hand, this is also known as the Ryder Gambit. So we're just gambiting the second pawn, sacrificing. We don't care about the center, don't care about the d4 pawn, and we just want to go for a full initiative. It's interesting, and believe me, from my own experience, it works perfectly fine in blitz games, even against title players. But of course, for tournament games, only if you're playing against those who don't know the theory, who don't study the theory, who don't use the engines, and who are kind of positional players who hate to play tactics. Otherwise, against well-prepared guys, don't you dare to play this because you're gonna get smashed. So let's go with this. And after queen f3, of course, the main move is queen d4, but they have a couple of options. For example, they get an option of playing c6. Makes sense. They want to develop this bishop, and before they want to develop this bishop, they want to secure the defense of the b7 pawn. Bishop d3 is a nice move. You always sack this pawn, and here you would just be able to sack it for knight g on e2 followed by castle, or for bishop e3 followed by long castle. The choice is all yours. The thing is, just avoid queen exchange at all costs and go for the full, like activity of your pieces. After g6, knight g on e2, castles, castles, king h1. This is a typical prophylaxis where you want to place your king on h1 in order not to have some queen d4 with jack. So, and in order to be able to use your knight on the king side for the attack. After queen g3, knight bd7, queen h4. Now, most of the guys who are familiar with the Hillbilly attack against Caro-Kann they're going to like this type of position, and they will say, okay, this looks good. It looks possible for playing. And what is about to play bishop h6 to take advantage of the open f file of the rook on f1 and to go for the attack. I like this position, and I'm gonna show you one highly rated game, queen b6, rook b1, in order to develop the dark square bishop. Played bishop g5, b4, a4, knight g3, kicked the knight on a5, and played um, uh, knight a4 followed by knight c5 and eventually c4. If you ask me, yes, maybe white is down a pawn in this case, but we got a full compensation, and I wouldn't mind to be white in this position. In the case of g6, pretty much similar approach could be used with the bishop d3, knight g2, but in this game I decided to show this one, where white played bishop e3. Now he decides to defend the pawn and to go only for the pawn sack. After bishop c4, bishop b3, knight g2, queen g3, reminds me very much on what we've previously seen, a3 to limit the knight and get a shelter for the light square bishop, plays queen h4, goes with the bishop on c1, plays h3, brings the bishop back into the action, and eventually he played bishop h6. All the time black was just trying to somehow catch the dark square bishop. Of course, white doesn't want to give it up, and eventually he went with the bishop h6 and with a great activity on the king side. In the case of e6, I believe it's a little bit suspicious approach, because simply the light square bishop on c8 doesn't seem to be that good. And of course, bishop f4, long castles, knight h3, capturing by knight, and you're just down a pawn. You're just down a pawn for open or semi-open f file, and you just want to launch the attack. So how do you usually launch the attack in similar type of positions in these Black Dimmer or just a Ryder Gambit? By playing g4. Playing g4 allows you to play g5, and then you just want to push these pawns on the king side and somehow break on the king side and do the king side break. So after knight b6, g5, knight e5, this guy captured. What I like about this game was the fact that he decided to sack the second pawn, queen a2, play queen e5, and go with the c4. White easily won this game. I'm going to show you the end of the game. We got to discuss this position a little bit. King, even though we're down like 2 pawns, and even though king on c1 looks a little bit, let's just say, weakened, way worse is the king on g8, believe it or not. And actually, this game has proven this. This guy played a5. He wanted to play for a3. This guy played h5. He wants to play h6. So they do not have time for a4 and a3. Check. King c2. Check. King b1. Now probably this guy should tell to his opponent, thank you so much for improving my king and placing it on an even better square b1, where you won't be able to harass it anyhow. So after f6, g takes, rook takes, boom. Now he threatens queen takes f6. And they have to go rook f7, you go h6, and da-da-da-da, bishop g6. And the game was won this way. What a nice and easy game by white after he was 2 pawns down. And now many of you could be, like, actually I cannot, could be mistaken, but I cannot simply blame you for thinking this way, like I'm down 2 pawns. Yes, you're down 2 pawns in this position. But on the other hand, what's the problem about this position? I have h5 and h6. I have h5 and g6. But okay, h5, h6 is the main idea. I have attack. What do you have? You have rook on a8 that doesn't do anything. Bishop on c8, absolutely inactive. King that is kind of weak after we play just 2 moves, h4, h5, and h6. And queen on a2 that looks at first glance good around the king, but it does basically not. So this is what you have to avoid in your games when you play. Anyways, let's go for the main line. And what happens when they take on d4? This is especially interesting for this lecture, this variation with the queen takes d4, where you of course play bishop to e3. This double pawn sacrifice is something that I enjoy very much in faster time controls. Even though your name is Boris Gelfand, as one of the best defenders nowadays, or I don't know, Magnus Carlsen, you still have to be on top of your task and to find all these, let's just say, like best defensive moves. In this case, after bishop e3, they have so many possibilities. I'd like to show you one that happened in more than 70 games so far. Queen b4. They're up 2 pawns, they want to take on b2 and send you home. You play long castle and say, okay, but you'll have to wait for that, baby. So, long castles. And now, let me show you what happened in more than 70 games. People just go with the bishop g4a, guys. I'm not talking about like 70 blitz or bullet games. I'm talking about the over-the-board games. It's very easy for any kind of club player to miss the next move by white. Are you ready? It's knight b5. So you just go with the knight b5 and you threaten knight c7 checkmate. They can't capture the queen. Simply position is completely winning. You want to go with the knight c7 mate. In case they defend it, we just go queen b7 and win the rook piece and everything else. What a nice way to win it. On the other hand, after queen b4 castle c6, you just go rook d4 and you just go queen g3. Queen g3 is nice because it stops these possible ideas of e6 and bishop e7 and force them to play g6. Rook a4. There is another point behind queen and g3. You can't bring your queen back on c7. You gotta go here, bishop e2, knight f3, knight g5, queen f2, knight h3. This guy decided to capture for some reason, played castle, and he absolutely underestimated white's attacking possibilities. So played rook h4, threatening on h6, played bishop d3, taking advantage of the king on h7, played rook g1, and played queen g2. Believe it or not, black resigned because he simply couldn't prevent and couldn't stop the bishop g6. But not only that, look at the pawn on h6, look at the existing king on h7, and in how big danger that king was in this case. After bishop e3, they can also play queen e5. Queen e5 is one of those moves where you play long castle and they simply cannot play bishop g4 because you play queen b7. By the way, I'm going to forgive you if you don't see it at the moment, but I'm not going to forgive you if you, in your games, miss that if they take the rook, you don't take the rook, but you actually deliver checkmate on c8. So after knight c6, which looks as the only move because it develops piece, it defends the pawn indirectly on b7, and they just threaten bishop g4. You play bishop b5, pinning this piece. And when they go bishop d7, queen e2. Queen e2 is important because you just want to go with the knight f3 and harass this queen on e5. So when they go a6, knight f3, h3, you sack the piece. But this is a nice correspondence game between very strong players. And after a takes g4, I like it so much. I like the fact that white in this game was 4 pawns down. And I even like the fact, I actually even like more the fact that he was fighting for a win all the time and eventually they drew the game because somehow black got lucky, I'd say. And finally, if bishop e3 and they just go with the queen d8. This is a passive but also pretty solid approach. You play rook to d1. They can't play bishop d7 because you take here and boom, rook takes d7. I found a game like this ended up exactly like this in 9 moves, which is a very nice one. So when you play rook d1, they gotta play knight b7. And here you can play g4, always g4 and g5. But this guy decided to play bishop c4. And after a6, played knight h3. I very much like development of white in this game. He played bishop c4, knight on h3. He maybe wants to launch some action with the g4. But actually, he just wants to do a kingside attack since the f-file is open. So this one threatens knight e5, bishop e3. I know that at the moment your light square bishop doesn't have like a big role in this game, but you're always supposed to keep it up because it might get at some point. After castles knight e5, queen e2, b6, played knight b5, played c4. Now you can, for example, use the bishop c2 to give that bishop some attacking role. Took on d6, and after this played rook to d4. And when you look at the game, he was a bishop pair. He had actually a bishop pair. He was down a pawn, but he had a full initiative and actions on the king side. After knight c5, boom, rook takes f6. This reminds me on Kiane Heva Gambit, if you remember, guys, the video that I made there. And after knight b3, a takes b3, g takes f6, he played bishop h6, and this guy resigned, because in the case of this, you can be beautiful with queen g4 and just tell him sweet dreams, man. Or instead of f5, they can go king h8, but then you play queen f3, threatening this mate. Now the rook on d4 does a great job because it prevents queen d8. And after this, now you threaten queen g7. And when they go rook g8, you just go queen e5 and deliver checkmate like this. All things considered, they gotta go queen g4. And it's the only move that makes perfect sense there. So you play queen f2 because you can do anything, but please don't you dare to exchange queens here, because you're down usually one. In these Raiders Gambit positions, 2 pawns. So they go e5. Knight e4, I just decided to show you because it was played between that guy Emil Diemer, who was white, and Ports back to 1948. So according to the engines, after bishop d3, white has an amazing compensation, and this is how you should play. But I'm gonna show you this game because it kind of has like historical value. So after like castles a6, knight f3, bishop d3, a3, queen d2, rook h2, e1, and just when this guy thought like everything is cool and he managed to make even castle, Diemer played bishop f5 and came up with this beautiful sacrifice. The thing was that after rook takes d2, this is checkmate with a double check. And another thing was that if bishop e6, he takes on d8 and delivers checkmate like this. So just like you see, this is how this Diemer's or Raiders Gambit appeared for the first time in chess practice. After e5, a very important move here to be made is a3. Please don't you dare to blunder and to forget about this one, because then black is really going to have an easy game, and probably you're gonna swear me, and I'm gonna be responsible for your losses. So after bishop d6, knight f3, they just go with the knight c6, and you go with a long castle. And I'm about to show you one game that I played, where my opponent played queen e6. In the game that I want to show you was a6. That's the main, let's just say, game and the main course of this lecture that was played in a high-rated game between two 2,500 correspondence players. But what happens if they just go with a queen e6? Looks normal. He just wants to put the queen back, but this was my blitz game. I played h3 to stop knight g4, of course. Played g4, so I don't only stop and prevent knight g4, but I also support the g4 idea. Brought my bishop back to d2. Why? Because in some variations, you just want to go after the a7 pawn in case they go with long castle, but at the same time, after this, they just go with a6 to stop knight b5. And now the thing is, you just go with the knight h4. The idea of knight h4 is very, very strong. Since you can't move this knight anywhere, you just want to move it to f5 and do some very special things. After queen e7, bishop c4, for example, now, you don't want to make short castle because you're going to lose after knight g6, well known and nice trick. You can't play, actually, you can play this one, but I believe after knight f5, bishop f5, queen f5, king b8, you would have like a pretty huge compensation for with the bishop pair open f5 and ideas like h4 and g5 and possibly going after the pawn on f7. This guy played bishop e6 and knight f5 threatening fork, rook g8, rook h to f1, and white just has an amazing initiative and Simply, they cannot easily make even long castle because of knight g7. All things considered, white should be great in these type of games. So the game that I assessed as one of the most important for this variation is a6. You just go h3. Harassing this queen is important because it gives you g4 support. It actually supports g4 later, prevents knight g4, and at the same time gets some important tempi for white for action on the king side. So after queen e6, knight g5, queen e7, bishop c4, threatening on f7, goes with the king b1 and plays rook h to f1. I especially like this move, and this really reminds me on all those nice gambits against French Caracan, Keone Hiva, where you just sack everything for the sake of a great activity and attack on the king side. H takes, bishop takes, played queen h4. He was now down a piece, threatens rook takes f6, went for the bishop f6. This guy played queen before, threatening mate. This was his last attempt, but after a beautiful defense with the knight a4, now he was about to resign. So after rook d8, the rook d8, played bishop e6, and the thing was, he was completely lost because he's gonna eventually, if you exchange the queens, bishop h4. Actually, you can even take on f7, but doesn't matter. You just go with this and eventually you're winning. This guy played g takes f6, played bishop f7, queen takes f6, queen g5, and mated black. What a beautiful game. What a beautiful example of how should you treat these positions and how much it is actually important to enjoy in stuff that you play. Wish you all the best, and hopefully at least you're going to learn some nice tactical tricks after this lecture. Bye bye, guys.